The biggest springboard to finding a fan base in China is through collaborations with local artists. That moves the needle more than anything else. So, and you might say, how do we do that when we don't know any? Like, let's imagine we know absolutely nothing about the market, and we've just gone on these platforms, and we've seen that there's a comment or two there, and you want to try and get a sense of like who is in my lane, who is in my genre in China, who I might be able to reach out to. So, and you can do that by searching around, let's say first of all, you can search for other artists who are in your lane in the West and see who their fans are listening to. You can look into their comments, and this is a lot of manual work, but it can actually be really rewarding.
What's going on? Welcome to The New Music Business. I'm your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business. The book, 3rd edition, is out now. Find it on all formats, audiobook, ebook, hardcover, however you like books, you can find it. Today, my guest is Alex Taggart. He is an expert on the Chinese music market, and that's what we're talking about today. Having spent 10 years in China overseeing local strategy for clients like Dua Lipa, Diplo, Lauv, John Legend, Lauv, and so many more, he really knows his stuff. He is now independent. He's an artist manager now, but we talk all about the China music market today. So if that's what you're interested in, that is what we're going to dive deep into. And this is our conversation today, just kind of gives you an introductory foundation. So if you don't know anything about the Chinese music market, this will give you a good starting point. We cover the various DSPs, their version of Spotify or Apple Music, how that exists there and how they differ. We talk about the social platforms there and what they are similar to here and how they function there. We talk about if you're an artist looking to break into China, how you go about that, and to see if you have traction in China. There's actually a lot of artists out there that I know of and I've heard of in the past that they didn't realize they were big in China, and you might be big in China and not even realize it. And he talks about how you can go about checking that to see if you have traction in China, because you might not realize this because they don't have the same social platforms or streaming services that we have, and it's kind of gated off that way. But there's ways to check into it. We also talk about the touring market a bit and how that works, how you'd go about booking shows, all of that. So it's very informative, and it's if you're interested in how the Chinese music market works and you want this introduction, this is the episode for you. You can find Alex on LinkedIn, just Alex Taggart, and you can message him there. He said his DMs are open on LinkedIn. You can find all of us that make the show happen at Ari's Take on all the socials. You can find me at Ari Herstand on Instagram. Visit aristake.com and get on our email list. That is where you're going to get the most up-to-date, relevant information about the new music business. aristake.com. Get on the email list. We'll ping you on new episodes, but more importantly, just send you important stuff that you want to know. But right now, if you wouldn't mind, just pause this. Leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Give us a comment on Spotify. Yes, you can leave comments on Spotify now, or leave us a comment on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button if you want us to make more episodes and for this to populate your feed. All right, let's kick into the show. Alex Taggart, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Ari. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, so you're here today to cover a topic that I have not covered yet on the podcast, and believe it or not, I had actually done a real deep dive on the China music market, and we were going to do a whole Ari's Take Academy course on it, and I had a couple of experts on this, and like I learned a bunch on this, and we were about to launch this course because I'm like, man, this is like really, really important. And obviously, it's a massive market. And we're going to launch this course, and I was going to release all these materials on the China music market in February of 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen because we're like, this is not good timing for this. And so then I just scrapped it and just like haven't thought about it since as we've kind of gotten back on our feet, collective feet here. But I would love to hear from your perspective before we get into the China music market. more specifically, just like give me your background on like where, like how you got into this market, and just like what your involvement is in it now.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Bit of a crazy story, but so I'm from a small town on a small island off the coast of England called the Isle of Man, which is where my company name comes from. I guess might talk about later.
Cool.
Grew up there. Went to school in Scotland, where I studied. I chose to study Chinese because I'd done French and Spanish already, and I started studying Chinese and Arabic, and then had to drop one of those in my third year. Ended up dropping Arabic and continuing with Chinese. Went out there to do a year abroad. Loved it. Decided I wanted to stay. I was actually working as a journalist for a national Chinese daily newspaper. I was I was in Beijing. I was on the Beijing city section. But at the same time, on the side, I was DJing and promoting and bringing DJs from the US and the UK over to play in China and to tour a little bit. And I was touring a little bit myself. Um, and 5 a.m. outside a club somewhere, I met this dude, Ed Pito, who had been running this company, Outdustry, which was helping music companies enter the Chinese market. And he said, do you want to come and work in the music industry? I was like, I have no idea what that is, but sure. So yeah, we got into it and started basically consulting for companies like Beggars Group and Merlin, uh, basically helping people navigate the market, and kind of built out into the publishing side, where we would be pitching songs to Chinese pop artists and collecting all the royalties for that. Also doing marketing, so helping Western artists grow their presence in the market there. So really kind of built out a team on the ground there, hired a really amazing local team, grew that team over I think around 10 years that I was in China, like on the ground in Beijing. And then moved to LA, but I was still running the rights and marketing teams from here. And then moved on from that this January into my current company, Isle of Management, which is artist management and music industry consultancy company. So that's kind of the
Cool.
story.
Right on. Yeah, no, that's great. So just as kind of like a foundation for people, the people in the industry in the Western world, I guess, or anywhere outside of China, can you just break down just how the China music market functions and works, and talk about everything from how people listen to music to touring? I mean, let's start with how people listen to music there. How does that work?
Yeah. So yeah, obviously massive market. Really, really complex. It's probably way more complex than we're going to be able to cover it in an hour. But like, let's do our best.
Sure.
So from the music consumption standpoint, it's basically it's not digital first. It's pretty much digital only. So it's through
You
local.
mean no physical?
Well, it's not physical. It isn't completely dead, but it's as a portion of kind of
Sure.
overall revenue, it's very small.
Okay.
But then so the majority of that is on local streaming platforms. So that it is heavily locally dominated. So that's the two main ones that will be relevant are the streaming platforms that are underneath Tencent Music Entertainment. Tencent may be a company that your listeners have heard of. Also, NetEase Cloud Music is where is basically the main competitor.
What are the two under Tencent? Just so we have a frame
under
reference.
Tencent, there are a few actually. There is the flagship one, which is QQ Music.
QQ,
and
right.
we can get into more details about how people check these out later if you want. QQ Music, and also Kugo, Kugou, which I think at last count has the most users. That's more QQ Music is more kind of first and second tier city users, people who are slightly more likely to be listening to Western music. Kugo is more kind of second, third, fourth tier cities. When I say first tier cities, I mean Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and kind of now Chengdu, Chongqing as well. And Kugo is more cities that that you wouldn't have heard of. It's where the vast majority of people live.
Mm,
And that's way more consumption of domestic music. Very,
okay.
very domestic dominated. And then also under Tencent Music, there is Coolwo, which is Kuwo, which is kind of similar to Kugo, just not as big. They also have a karaoke platform and various other kind of white label back end services under Tencent Music. But so yeah, they're
Hmm.
definitely like the biggest one. They have, I think, I want to say their current market cap is 20 billion US. Tencent Music, which is pretty serious.
Right. Yeah, Tencent's huge. So, okay, so there's those three or so under Tencent. Now, are they all streaming services similar to how we would understand them to be like a Spotify versus Apple Music? But I guess there's three under the same parent company. So, but are they streaming services? Do they function any differently?
Honestly, they're pretty much based on Spotify. So if
Okay.
you were to go onto QQ Music, which you can actually get onto only through a kind of a desktop browser from outside of China. If you try and go on your phone, it's going to make you download the app, which you can't do because of you have different stores. But if you
Right.
go on Y, like the letter Y .qq.com, you can actually
Hmm.
check that out. And it's they're built very similarly to Western streaming platforms on the face of it. Like they are recognizable as streaming platforms. There are some subtle differences and some really important ones. Like, for example, social is a much bigger part of the local DSPs in China. Um,
Right.
and you have your social profile within the platform as an artist or as a user. You can post updates. You can have followers. You can start kind of like a fan group. So social is a much heavier component, um, and they kind of differentiate by there's the things that they place it with how they allocate their real estate can be a little bit different to Spotify, but in general they're pretty recognizable.
And so QQ you said is kind of the tier one, tier two cities where most Western artists, people would be listening to Western artists on that. And then NetEase, where does this fall into it? And what's the market share versus the Tencent streaming services versus NetEase?
Yeah, so asking about market share touches on a really important thing to note with the market, which is it's not the black hole of data it used to be, but
Mm,
breaking down specifically like, who has the biggest market share, that requires more data than they are willing to provide.
okay.
So it's difficult to get a sense. So we're generally just kind of triangulating from private conversations or whatever. You can look at their market cap. It's one metric. I said Tencent Music Entertainment around 20 billion, NetEase around 3 billion US. Um,
What about kind of the artists and labels that you manage or have worked with or kind of help facilitate? I'm not sure what you call it, but when as an artist manager here would do, we would go and look at our analytics and our distribution platform, and we could tell very clearly what's more popular. Where are our listeners listening? Is it Spotify? Is it Apple Music? Is it Amazon, Pandora? All of them.
mm.
When you look at the whatever you're looking at, I don't know if it's dashboards or your distribution or however you want to break it down. Where do you find that most Western artists that you manage um, are the consumption is higher? Is it NetEase? Is it QQ? Are they pretty equal? Tell me like what's your vibe and take on all of it, like or based on your data, not the data that is publicly available. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So it's generally pretty publicly accepted. Like people generally acknowledge that NetEase, if you're an artist from outside of China, and whether that's Western artist, Japanese, Korean artist, you're probably going to be streaming on NetEase more than
Okay,
more than
okay,
anywhere else. Like NetEase is the
that's
more
what
kind
I
of
yeah.
the cooler one, I would say.
NetEase is the cooler one.
Yeah. Um,
That was what I learned like 5 years ago. I was curious if anything had changed, but NetEase has maintained the cool factor. All right.
yes, definitely.
So um, how would somebody check. So you gave us how somebody could check out QQ. It's y.qq.com. How would somebody check out NetEase? And let me just preface this a little bit because, when I looked into this previously, there were a lot of artists that did not know how many fans they had in China that were listening to them actively on NetEase. I had Andrew Lieb, who's an artist manager, on talking about how his band, actually years after they had disbanded, completely broken up, this band that he managed, a Chinese promoter got in touch with him and said that they were big in China and wanted to promote and book a whole tour for this band that had since broken up, but they had no idea, and they were like streaming really well and had hundreds of millions of streams, whatever. And it's a fun story. Anyone can go back and listen to the episode with Andrew Lee from years back. But I'm curious, how would a Western artist or manager or label even look into any of this stuff to see, do I have any traction on NetEase or any of the platforms in China?
Yeah, I mean, I have this conversation like several times a week with people saying like, I think we might have some traction in China, but I'm not sure. And then I will literally just, while talking to them, go on the app on my phone. I'll go, oh, you have 20,000 followers without a verified profile. So that's really good. I can do that because I have the app on my phone because I have a Chinese iTunes account. But for your listeners, they can go on music.163.com. That's the NetEase URL.
Okay.
So, and you can literally just search for your name and you can find your profile. And, in general, if your distributor is doing their job, which most of them do pretty well, you'll find your page, and you can click on your songs. You can see, is my catalog displayed properly? Is there anything that's misattributed? Is there anything that's not there? And then the really fun thing that you can do is you can click into your top song, and you won't be able to stream it, obviously, because of territory restrictions. But you'll be able to click on. Well, you shouldn't be able to stream it. If you can, that's a problem, right? But you can click on comments, which it's all in Chinese, so you'll need a bit of Google Translate. But you can go in and you can find the comments. And I've been in real time speaking to artists and their management before, and I say, right, I'm now looking at all the comments. You have 1,000 comments on this one song, and they're all talking about this one particular, Chinese ad in which this song was used that you've never heard about. And so that's just one of many, many, many different scenarios I've encountered where that being able to go into those comments and like I said, the social aspect of these platforms is much, much more prevalent. So you can go into the comments, you copy and paste into Google Translate, and you read them, and you're like, oh, my listeners here are here because of that one collab that I did with that one person, or there was a Chinese artist who shouted me out at some point, so just digging into these, you have to do a little bit of detective work to dig into the platform and say like, right, what's going on here? Like, I think there's something happening here. So which can be really fun for people when they discover something. On the other hand, you sometimes get globally huge, some of the biggest artists in the world who, I'll be talking to their teams, and then I'm looking them up in real time, like, oh, people just don't care, there's, for some reason, it just didn't hit. Whereas somebody, at some acts that are not necessarily particularly popular outside of China, a song for some reason has just sort of caught fire. And now they're huge. So, fun world.
Do they display public numbers other than comments? Can I see streaming numbers or anything like that?
You cannot see streaming numbers at all, which is a little bit difficult. One thing that you can see is so they have this thing, in addition to the streaming function, you can also sell what they call a digital album, which is basically a paid download of an album that effectively operates like an iTunes download. Like, let's say I'm an artist, I'm releasing a new album, and I want to release it as if it's an iTunes download or a Bandcamp download, but within the platform. it's not available to anybody else who doesn't pay for it. So you have to pay it in order to listen. You'll often get a load of, like your badge profile or something with it. You can see those numbers. So you can see how many of those have been bought. Those are kind of being phased out because
Sure.
they don't really go along with the narrative of pushing more people to be subscribers, because if there's
Right,
a
right.
bunch of people's music who you can't get even if you are a subscriber, it devalues the subscription. So there's
That makes sense.
more and more kind of paywall stuff coming in, and that's a really good thing. It's pushed the market in a good direction.
So, now break down a little bit more how NetEase works. There's comments, and historically, um, before a lot of the distributors were sending music officially to NetEase and the others, I know that users could upload content. Does that still exist? Is there still user generated music on NetEase, and is there video, or give me some more? Is it like a YouTube? Is it not like a Spotify? Like, break down how this kind of works.
Yeah, I'd say, well, yeah, just to like expand on your point there about how you used to be able to upload music, because it's an interesting thing, I think, for listeners, that it used to be basically kind of like a MySpace kind of thing, and
Mm,
the platforms were competing, and still to a certain extent are competing, on how complete their catalog was. And so if they didn't have something and a user had uploaded it, they'd be like, okay, well, we didn't get that content from the official kind of sources, but it's there, so we're just going to keep it there until someone tells us to take it down. Because it was
mhm.
like, hey, wouldn't you want to have your music available to the market? And
Right.
so there was a
But
big
they weren't getting
change.
paid for it.
No,
Right.
no, no, no. It's only relatively recently that people have been starting to get paid for anything, but now that
Right.
monetization is going much much better. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, went from being kind of like a bit of a Wild West kind of free user generated content world, which it's still not fully cleaned up, but it's much better now. To now where, yeah, vast majority of content is coming from the major labels, the indie labels, major distributors. Uh, like, it's coming from official sources. Users
Mhm.
can still upload if they are verified as a NetEase musician, and
Oh, okay.
that's the same on QQ. Um, that you can you register for a musician account, and you're basically kind of verified as a an indie content provider, like an indie artist.
Gotcha.
Um,
Right, right, right.
and then
Okay.
they will often, if you are verified as that, they will often say, oh, hey, since you're verified with us, how about you go exclusive with us and your music doesn't end up on any of the other platforms, and we will
Okay.
put some marketing behind you, which is another controversial thing.
Right, we had that a little bit in the States, with artists, that would window their releases from one streaming platform to another. It's not super common anymore. We're not really seeing that. You see that in the video streaming world of like Netflix versus
Hmm.
Max versus, whatever. Um, so okay. Um, All right, so that's good to know. Now, you said that things haven't really been monetized until more recently. Talk to me about monetization. How does this work? How are people, labels, artists getting paid for their streams now? Now that things are more or less monetized.
Yeah, so around, I want to say around sort of 2015, 16,
Mm,
that's when more, well, maybe a little bit earlier, 2014, 15, is when the DSPs started saying, okay, we realize that we're getting close to lawsuits here, and the labels are putting a lot of pressure on us. We're gonna, and also there's been a lot of copyright law reform in China, particularly on the digital front. So it was like, okay, we can't keep messing around here. So they started doing these deals, where the majority of the deals that were happening around that time with the major labels, with the Chinese DSPs, were exclusivity buyouts. So let's say, I think all of them, Sony, Warner, and Universal. eventually all threw in with Tencent and said, right, we want X amount of money per year,
Mm-hmm.
for over 3, or I think in some cases 4 years, and our content is only available on Tencent. Because that was the competition. Like, if you they weren't really competing on product, or they were just competing on, I have this catalog, and if you want to use it,
Mm-hmm.
I can license it to you, but I'm going to crush you on the price. Which is that was kind of their strategy to get NetEase out of the game. But NetEase didn't die because they kept licensing some of that content from Tencent, but then they also just killed it on the product front. They said, right, we have
Mm.
this amazing, like, well curated app that is sending you these amazingly algorithmically curated user generated playlists. That was their kind of USP, which people really loved. And the labels and the artists really wanted to work with NetEase on the promo side. So that's how it was. That was the initial kind of bump of monetization, was these huge buyout checks that were being given to the majors.
Sure.
The indie sector, so that was the sector that I was kind of working in with Beggars and Merlin, did not do exclusivity deals. They did deals with every DSP individually. So that
Mm-hmm.
was not just Tencent and NetEase, that was others as well, and continue to do others as well. And that was, and those were deals that would be basically completely recognizable to anyone who's done a deal with Spotify, Apple, Amazon, with per stream minima, and per subscriber minima. These very
What does
kind of
that mean? Per stream minima, per subscriber minima.
So per stream minimum is, for if a user streams a song on a user who is a free user, let's say, or a paid user streams this song, this is the payment that they will get. It's basically the per stream payment.
I didn't think that it was a thing for Western. For Spotify, Apple Music, none of those. It's all based on stream share, as what they call it, is based on the total money that the streaming service takes in. They pay out about 70% based on the total number of streams you get in proportion to all the other streams on the platform. You get that amount of money based on more or less the subscribers who listen to you, if it's a paid subscriber, a free subscriber, or whatever. Are you saying that there are minimums
So
for the Chinese ones, or is that also in Western ones? I just didn't know that
yeah,
for
so
Spotify and Apple Music. I've never heard of that.
it will often be the whichever is higher.
Hmm.
It'll be the higher of the revenue share payout, which is the one that you're talking about, versus the per stream. So you count up all the per streams, and in the vast majority of cases, the revenue, well, hopefully the revenue share payout will be higher. But it's, I guess,
Okay.
going into markets that are kind of more developing, you want to say, like, right, in a
Right.
market where it's very, very badly monetized at the time, you want to have a certain kind of guarantee. So
And what are some of those minimum per stream payouts that you're talking about? Because it's got to be less than 0.003 or something dollars, which is like less than a half a penny per stream, because that's like what more or less we're seeing from like Spotify, etc.
yeah. So probably can't talk about like specifics about any specific deal, but it is, when we started out, it was off the bottom of the scale, of
What does that mean?
Spotify and Apple. Less than, uh, you know um, divide by 10,
Oh,
in some
okay.
cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But that's improved over the years, and as the services themselves have started putting more behind the paywall, have been better at marketing. They've done a bunch of bundling deals, and now the it's generally the revenue share portion of the deal that's being activated. So because the platforms are making enough money, so that the revenue share turns out to be more than whatever it would have been on a per stream basis. So
Sure.
so that's a good sign.
And are all the like do you have much experience with any of the standalone kind of DIY distributors and what their deals are? Like, is there a difference between DistroKid versus a TuneCore versus Symphonic versus 1 RPM? Just like are there differences in terms of what they would see in terms of payouts from NetEase?
So I would say a lot of those are going in through Merlin, um, because
Okay.
it's just the a simple route that is generally on major label terms. I don't know the specifics of someone like a TuneCore, which would obviously be part of a Believe deal. Believe
Hmm.
is very very present in China. So I would
And they're
assume
not part of Merlin?
Believe is not. No,
Or
believe they used to be, I believe, but they now have their own deals.
And so for people that don't know what Merlin is, it's just a um they it's kind of like the middleman. They're like to negotiate on behalf of labels and distributors with the DSPs. So it's kind of like Universal has all these subsidiary labels, but they're only one entity negotiating for the rates, and that's Universal. And then all the subsidiary labels get that rate. And Merlin is similarly acting as the parent, more or less, but they don't have any ownership. They're just representing these labels and distributors to negotiate a rate. And so any distributor that's part of Merlin will then can get their rate that's theoretically would be higher than what they would negotiate on their own if they went independently, right?
Right, exactly. The difference being that Merlin is a not for profit.
Okay, gotcha.
So
And
the rate that they take is tiny.
right. And so when there's a label or distribution group that like Believe you said that's not part of Merlin, they're negotiating on their own behalf. And then, this was more recently, there why it was in the news a couple months ago was because Merlin and TikTok got into it, and TikTok was like basically said we're going to take down all the Merlin music because we can't come to an agreement, and this has just kind of gone round and round. So some of the labels actually left the Merlin group and are now, I guess, distributing on their own. But that's getting into serious weeds of insider baseball talk on the music industry, which we don't need to get into. So, getting back to the rates, or I guess just zooming out a little bit more. Um, for the artists that you're representing or managing, or the labels, and just kind of what you've seen, um, are people making decent revenue from streaming from their music, I guess, their recorded music in China, just overall?
Mm. Um, Honestly, if so, you have a few different categories. One is somebody who's had a viral smash in China for whatever reason, and this is happening more and more these days because of Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, which was
Mhm.
actually the original TikTok. If you have a
Mhm.
song that for some reason goes viral there, that's actually going to drive a pretty decent amount of streaming on the actual like monetized DSPs
So it
in
works
China.
similarly as it does here. Yeah.
Exactly. But in China, like obviously the like you're saying, like the payouts are generally much smaller. But if you get that scale, like if you have something that is genuinely like a mega hit, it's funny. Some people come to me and say like, I think I think I have something that has 1 million streams in China. I'm like, oh, it's actually not that much, you know.
Right.
So I mean, is it even a lot in the West anymore? But um, you know, are they how else are people making money? um, I would say the artists and labels that I've worked with who are really well, one, who are willing to kind of who are very curious and willing to learn, rather than saying like, oh, I've had conversations with people like, oh, just make us popular in China. Like, well, do you
Right.
care? And if you don't care and you're not like willing to engage and learn, then like probably not. You're not going to do well. But for ones who do, and they do the right things, they get their local social profiles verified and get active on there, which is also something we can talk about. And I often use the example of Lauv, who was a client for a long time. Who I think you had Emma McDonald on the podcast before. Who
Right. Yeah. Good research. That was a few years back, and that's
mhm,
right. That was when yeah, she was helping. She was kind of the label manager essentially for his rollout because he was completely independent, being distributed through AWOL. But she was kind of working as part of the label manager on the management arm of Lauv,
Right.
who's still, I believe, independent, work distributing through AWOL.
Yeah, went to Virgin and then back to AWOL.
Right.
But so he was our client the whole way through that, and we worked with Emma to basically grow the Lauv project in China from zero to now being, I would say, in the top 5 Western artists in China.
No shit.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I remember seeing some stats from one of the, I can't remember which label it was, whether it was AWOL or Virgin, that said that he was that one of the albums, China was the 3rd biggest territory globally for revenue, not just for number of streams, for revenue on the album.
Wow, for revenue.
So that was a real
That's
test
huge.
case.
And when we're talking revenue, are we talking does the revenue and rights work similarly in China as they do here in terms of sound recording and publishing? Do they break it up that way? Do they keep track of publishing? Are they paying publishing? Do they, all of that? Break down how the
Oh
revenue
man,
flows.
my favorite topic. But publishing. So I would say we did a lot of heavy lifting in the early days of going from, we don't want to pay you any money for your records, to a really well, decently monetized market that
Hmm.
took a lot of difficult negotiations over these contracts. Um, and Publishing, then obviously we got into the publishing business, pitching songs from songwriters and producers outside of China into Chinese pop projects. So we became a lot more interested in how publishing is monetized, and obviously, recordings, for all the complexity of the market, at least there's only generally one party that needs to be paid. But in publishing, obviously, way more complex. So
Right.
there was a bit of a process of uh, kicking and screaming, dragging the rights management people at the DSPs into these meetings, where we had to talk about publishing. Um, and but the headline is that, yes, publishing does exist in China. I hear from a lot of people who think it doesn't, particularly songwriters and producers here in LA who I speak to, who will say, I pitched a song to China, I think somebody cut it, and I got $1,000 and I never heard about it again. But no, publishing does exist in the particularly in the streaming world. It There's a quirk of Chinese copyright law that that doesn't that basically says that all the revenue generated for digital publishing um, is basically treated as a mechanical that can be collected by the publisher, um, and that is
Okay.
the subject of a lot of debate. But the upshot of that is, for listeners, that if you have a song that's streaming really well in China, you should be talking to your publisher about it, because they should be collecting.
Right. So it treated as a mechanical, as opposed to how it's done everywhere else, where it's treated as both a mechanical and a performance royalty. And so it's essentially, for most of the DSPs here, and what I've seen, it's essentially like 50-50 of the publishing. 50% of the publishing money goes to the as treated as a mechanical, which is collected by mechanical rights organizations, and then 50% is treated as a performance royalty, which going to the PROs, performing rights organizations. And for the DIYers that are listening out there, that just in general, if you're only signed up to a PRO like an ASCAP or BMI in the States, or a SOCAN in Canada, or a PRS in the UK, or something like that, you're only getting that 50% or so. You're missing out on the mechanicals. You need somebody to collect a mechanical. Now, if you have a publishing deal, which a lot of indie artists do not, but if you do have a publishing deal, if you're at that level, then the publisher, they know how to collect all the mechanicals and the performance royalties from all over the world. Theoretically, they should. And they work with sub publishers, and their job is to collect all of your possible publishing money from wherever it exists. That's what a publisher does. but there, are millions of DIY artists out there, and most of them do not have publishing deals, and so it's important for them to understand and how this works and to collect that money, or enlist an entity to collect that money. So you could enlist an admin publisher or something like that. So getting back to China, as you saying that they are now treating publishing money as just a mechanical. Okay, it makes it easier. So now we know that. In relation to the sound recording revenue that's generated, how much of the pie is it? So, for instance, in the States, I've seen it's publishing money is about 1/5 of the sound recording money that you could earn, that a track earns, rather. About a fifth of the total money or so goes for publishing. What is it in China?
Generally the same.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. Gotcha.
So
Okay.
just a quick point on the PRO point.
Yeah.
So China does have a PRO. It's called the MCSC, the Music Copyright Society of China. It is basically completely defunct. Nobody has any
Mm.
faith in it whatsoever. It's generally
Yikes.
thought to be pretty
Okay.
corrupt. And by the way, even though the copyright law doesn't technically give them the right to collect from digital publishing in China, they still collect basically protection money from the DSPs in order to because
What do you
they're
mean protection money?
because so the MCSC is kind of a quasi governmental organization,
Ah.
and they go into the DSPs and they say, hey, we know that this is the subject of intense legal debate over whether we're able to collect here or not, and that's putting it lightly. But we see that you're growing, and we're basically the government, and so if you want to be able to continue to operate, you have to pay us more money this year. And does
So it's
and
a shakedown.
it's completely it's a shakedown, and we don't do those in the music
Okay.
industry.
Yeah, right. Not
So
anymore.
it
Well, not
but
that blatantly, I
right,
guess we
right.
should say.
And that money, some of it might end up being paid back to if there's some a DIY artist who's listening, and they're registered with BMI, ASCAP, PRS, whoever. Maybe there is some of that pops up in their statement, and you say, oh, hey, I got a cent from China, but unlikely to see much of it at all. So yeah, it's tricky.
Right. So how is it? So then, how is it flowing? How is it working? So the DSPs, so like NetEase or QQ, who are they paying the publishing money to?
Generally to publishers.
So the publisher, and it's so okay. Not an intermediary. So in pretty much every other territory, like for instance in the US, by law, every DSP is required to pay the Mechanical Licensing Collective, the MLC, all of the mechanical royalties. So by law, this is in the US. So Spotify, all of the mechanical royalties go directly to the MLC. Then publishers have to go to the MLC, and the MLC pays the publishers. That's the intermediary. And then similarly, Spotify is paying the performance royalties to the PROs, ASCAP, BMI for the performance side. They're these intermediaries. So what you're saying is there is no intermediary because MCSC is a scam and they're just shakedown artists from the government. You're saying that publishers go directly to NetEase and say, hi, I represent these songwriters. Here are the streams that we've seen happen, or from our statements from the label side or whatever, pay us our money kind of a thing?
Yes, exactly. And actually,
Aha.
they're going directly and getting statement. They're not saying, "Oh, we've seen this from the label." They're going in and saying, like, "Oh, hey, I'm a publisher, and I want you to send me a report directly
Mm,
on how many." So, and this is still absolutely a work in progress.
sure.
It's not perfect, and the reporting systems. These platforms weren't really built with reporting in mind, I would say. Like with Spotify, when they launched, it was like, right, okay, we have to be able to feed back data. And when these platforms launched, it was like, okay, we just want to get as much music up there as possible and serve
Right, right.
fans. So it's not really in their DNA, but they've tried really hard, and in general, they've made a lot of progress with like giving. If every publisher out there came to Spotify and said, "Hey, I want a report right now from you directly on my streaming," it would the whole thing would explode, right? So
Yeah,
it's you have to give them some credit.
sure. Cool. I wanna transition a little bit and talk touring. Let's say there is an artist out there or a manager looking into this, and they see that they have traction in China. They have people, a lot of comments on their songs on NetEase, and they're like, "Wow, I think we have fans here." How would they go about touring China?
Yeah. So, well, one handy thing is that the the market is so, that there's so many people out there who are keeping their eye on these things, that if someone does
Yeah,
have a really good amount of traction, you will be getting inbound requests for sure. Um,
gotcha.
but
Cool.
but for some people, they're like, we don't have anything inbound, but we see that there's something happening, and we want to just educate ourselves in general. The I would say that, from just to talk about like the top level first, there is, Live Nation are pretty much crushing it in China.
Okay.
Live Nation and AEG do a really good job of like the sort of top to mid tier. Um,
hmm
and they
And what capacity level clubs are we talking that they are running? Is it
uh,
similar to here as like 1,000 up to arena level?
No, I mean, they go lower than that. So
Okay.
we're talking everything from arena level to, you know, uh, 500 plus.
hmm I
So
guess we have that in the States now too. They've acquired so many of these little clubs that
right.
yeah, they're doing small clubs as well. So
Mm.
okay, interesting. And are they do they own the clubs there? Or are they just kind of promoting the shows there and they're running them and facilitating it?
Generally, kind of promoting. They'll do the entire tour,
Yeah.
for an artist.
Okay, cool.
Then you also have the biggest Chinese competitor, which is called Showstart,
Mm,
who are very localized, but then also, and when I say very localized, I mean, I guess they have very strong connections across the country. They're like very much a local DNA company,
yep.
but also who are really good at communicating with Western artist teams.
hmm
So they are, really giving Live Nation a run for their money, I would say. And yeah.
So, for the booking agents out there that are listening, if their artists have not received inbound requests from China, are you saying that it's not worth it for them to try to book a tour, or how would maybe they go about booking? Do they just like hit up their Live Nation and be like, "Hey, can you put us in touch with the China person?" Is that the most straightforward way, or is there more, um, is there a more direct way to go about this? Do they hit up Show Start, or what would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the most straightforward way is speaking to either Showstart or a Live Nation rep, or somebody like that. Um,
hmm
but if there are booking agents listening, which I'm sure there are, the most fun way to do it is to start just investigating, getting to know the market better, and getting to know where the venues are. Start getting that direct connection. Ideally, spend some time there. There's a lot more of these trade missions that go from the US and the UK and various other countries to China, where they will, you get on this basically um, a group trip where you go to the market and you meet a bunch of promoters. You go to some venues. There is a very
Cool.
this is a really interesting point, actually, that there is a very, very active, I would say, I mean, I want to say underground, like DIY world in China. It,
Mm,
it ebbs and flows based on how welcoming the government is to indie venues at any given time. Obviously, COVID did a number on it, as it
yeah.
did everywhere. But there are some really great, some of the venues I toured around or bring DJs to play at. You know, some of them we did 200 to 300 capacity shows, but those are the real fans. Those are these real people who really, really get it. Um, so that's all there. And that, like, is there an easy pathway from these underground venues suddenly into the 500 600 caps, and then into the stadiums?
hmm
Not it's not such a uh, uh, symbiotic ecosystem as it would be in the West, where you see something popping on the underground and then it moves up and then moves up. It takes a lot more to do that in China. It's a much slower process, I would say. The underground is much, much further than the mainstream, from the mainstream than it
Gotcha.
would be here.
Got it. So what do you recommend for artists? If you mentioned earlier, the artists that want to lean in and figure it out and take it seriously, and let's say there's an artist managers listening right now that want to do that, that want to prioritize China. How do you recommend they go about that?
Yeah. I would say first step is find out where you're at currently with China. So one thing, look at your DSP report, look at your just reports from your distributor or whatever, or your label. Look at whether you have any money coming through from China already, whether there's any streams on that. Step one. Next stop, I'd say, would be to go to those URLs that I mentioned before. So that's y.qq.com and music.163.com, and you have to do it on a browser on your computer, not on your phone. And look yourself up and see if there'll be a number right underneath your profile photo that will say how many followers you have. So that's also a good thing to look at. This is all to get a sense of like, is there any organic pickup? Because if there isn't, then it is, you have to ask yourself a serious question about like, is this worth it for me? Unless, there are some artists that I work with who are, let's say Chinese American, who are like, I know that there's not much there right now, but I'm Chinese, and so I can really lean in. I'm like, okay, cool. It's fine that you're not like massively popping already. You can put in that work and build. But if you're someone who is just kind of curious and you see there's not really much there, you find out that, and you can search around for other artists who you think are kind of in your lane and see if any of them are doing well. And if your genre just doesn't seem to be working in the market, it's possible that it might not be worth spending all that time and money trying to figure it out. Because it's it is even today, even though I've spent more than 10 years working in the Chinese market, I learn something new every day. And it moves so fast that like, is it going to be worth, and it's also such an amazing and fun place to go and to be. So it still can be worth it for the journey, just to, to learn more about a different place in the world that maybe influences your art and all of that stuff. So
in terms of kind of getting back to the touring side of it, how does that work in terms of, let's say you have the traction. Let's say there's a promoter that has reached out and said, hey, you're big in China. Let me set up a tour for you. What does that look like? What expenses are they covering? What are the guarantees they can expect? Or are there guarantees? What do the deals look like, I should say? Just kind of break down how a typical maybe club level or mid-level tour works with a promoter in China.
Yeah, so actually lots of different ways. So it's difficult to kind of cover everything, but I'll give a general sense. And also like a big caveat is that the market does move so quickly that it's always changing.
Sure.
But top line is that there are guarantees, but generally only at the sort of I would say Live Nation and Show Start level. Even for them sometimes, if you let's say if you're under, so a good rule of thumb that that there's a friend of mine in China who runs a big chain of clubs, who says that his rule of thumb is that you take Nettie's followers and divide by 100, and that is your rough number of tickets that you're going to be able to sell.
Huh. Interesting. Very cool. Okay.
So yeah,
that's great.
And
that's in any market, or what market are we talking? Just Beijing?
Those are in the like I said, first tier markets. So Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, like Chengdu, Chongqing.
Tell me what you're doing these days, and what is I know you have your company, Isle of Management, and so what are you focusing on these days, and who are you working with?
Yeah, so started after I left the company I was with. We built out in China over 10 years. This year I started my own management company. Right now I'm managing an artist named Bohan Phoenix, who is a Chinese American rapper who has who has sort of grown on both sides of China and the US since the beginning of his career, really. So he first got started in New York, and I got to know him because he shot a music video on my rooftop in Beijing in maybe 2015. Because
Cool.
they needed for the video, they needed an old school Chinese courtyard, and I was the only person that anyone knew who who was living in one. So that's how we got to know each other. But yeah, started working together this year, and he's kind of uh, gone kind of back and forth between China and the US. He was
Mm-hmm.
on this year. He was on, or I guess last year now. He was on the biggest kind of rap TV competition show in China,
Okay.
which is a huge part of the industry there. Is still the kind of reality competition shows, and that's across hip hop, across like rock music, pop music.
Hmm.
It's a huge. It is basically the way that you break a mainstream artist still in China is through these TV
Wow.
shows.
Through
Yeah.
these. Oh, interesting. So that's like, I mean, at this stage, I mean, American Idol and The Voice are kind of just fodder for middle America, passive viewership. It's not really launching careers like it did, Kelly Clarkson or Carrie Underwood or whatever. But or even like, I guess we had Hustle and Flow for one season here,
Hmm.
the rap Netflix rap competition show with Chance the Rapper and Cardi B and stuff, but we don't have it anymore. And so yeah, that doesn't really move the needle, I guess, in the States. I guess you have Eurovision in across Europe, which that launched Maneskin. I don't know how to
Right.
say their
Right.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Mainskin, right? That's not correct, but the Italian version of that. So you're saying that there's multiple competition shows in China for all different genres that are actively launching Chinese artists. That's pretty cool.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And well, how cool it is, I'm not sure. They,
I should say that's fascinating
yeah,
and
it's
interesting
yeah,
that
it's
that
interesting for
exists and
sure.
it actually, yeah.
Yeah, particularly in the
Okay.
pop, but like in the pop music world, like if you want to launch a boy group or a girl group or whatever, like you do that through a
Sure.
TV show. Um, and the big pop stars, you know, often now, like very recently, pop stars who have very recently come out of these shows themselves are now the judges. Um,
Yeah,
do they
right. Sure.
have
That's how
the
it works here.
right, right? Do they have the clout? Do these shows have the clout that they had, when they first came around 10 years ago? Not so much. The hip hop show and the show about rock bands, they kind of picked up around, I think it was like 2016, 2017, and then they were
Okay.
huge. They took off. Um, Now they're still influential, and they are, they're a quick route to kind of a huge audience. But and yeah, still very very much relevant to the market. So yeah, that was just sort of a little fun sort of tidbit there. But so yeah, the artist that I'm managing, Bohan, he's been on that show. He was previously had uh, he was signed with Warner um,
Hmm.
right around COVID. So that was tricky for him to get to China. But he so now back to being independent, and has this really interesting position where he's really the only um, artist in the rap world who has been able to work both sides of China and the US simultaneously. So that is, keeping, and that it's a real tough job because it means you have all the platforms in China that you need to run at the same time as running all your Western platforms. So if there's any artists out
Hmm.
there who thought just running Instagram and TikTok and everything was a lot, like doing all of the Chinese ones as well is
Yikes.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
that's
lot.
wild.
But yeah, he raps in both English and Chinese, and one of very very few people who's able to do that successfully and fluently, and is now, after being on the show in China, did a couple of years out there, and is now back in the US and refocusing on the US market for the time being.
Gotcha. So is that idol manager? You're exclusively kind of managing Bo on Phoenix, and that's the main focus right now.
So that is
Cool.
that's the artist management roster right now, but
Uh huh.
also consulting for various other clients on their China strategy. So the primary one being Merlin, actually, who we discussed earlier.
Right. Right. Okay. So that's right. And so you were and Beggars Group. That's not
Not so.
current
Beggars
still.
Group now has direct hires in China,
Oh,
so they
okay.
have their effectively their own office there. But over the years, some of the artists we worked with, we like I said, Lauv, we did um, Dua Lipa, John Legend,
Mm-hmm.
Leve, many artists over the years, and I'm also uh, consulting for other artists and labels who are entering the China market. Not any that I can
Cool.
discuss right now, but yeah.
Sure.
But yeah, it's sort of recognizing that for a lot of people, China is still very much a black hole.
Yeah.
And I was actually curious. You, as an artist and songwriter, what's been your experience? What interaction have you had? Have you seen any royalties? Yeah, I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
not much. I mean, that's one of the things I haven't really dug too deep into it for either my music or the artists that I manage. Similarly, my like Andrew's band that I was mentioning, they got the incoming message, and I figured like if somebody told us, you're big in China, we'd like focus and look into it. But like you said, it's like a whole other set of tools that we need to learn and utilize, like all the separate parallel social media channels and figure out the streaming game, whatever. So like so many artists and managers, I think I've just been relying on my distributor to just hope that they're doing their job to get the music out there and hope that they're collecting the revenue if there is revenue. I don't know. I haven't dug that deep into the spreadsheet of like, is NetEase, how much money have I made from NetEase or QQ or anything like that. But it hasn't really, um, it hasn't really uh, shown itself on my reports necessarily anywhere that I would pay attention to, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah.
I'm just always really curious about people's like how they're how whether they've kind of come into contact with it before. And
Hmm.
I was wondering if there is you know would you want to would you want to do a live, we look up Grassroots District and see and see what's going on, or maybe we
Sure,
do that afterwards.
we only have 4 songs out, but let's look it up. Let's see if anyone has found Brassroots District of our 4 songs in anywhere in China.
um this
What
and
are you looking up on Music
on
163?
NetEase.
NetEase? Yeah. Huh.
um no, oh yeah, no, there we go. uh okay. Oh wow. Well, so it's only available to VIP users, which means it's kind of hey, uh yeah, oh yeah. It's there in HD. So that, yeah,
What does
that's
that mean? It's only available to VIP
no, no, sorry,
users.
that was not that was a different
Oh,
thing. I was clicking on the wrong thing.
got it.
Well, so it's there. Those 4 songs have been distributed, so that's
Okay.
that is, they exist.
Sweet.
And there's a couple of comments. So I'm just gonna. There's one comment that just says "mmm," uh,
Yeah. Okay.
and there's
Sweet.
another one that says "This is awesome" on the song "Together."
Sweet.
So
All right.
there you go.
Wait, so
Those are
why
the
can't
two
I see
comments.
that? I'm on music.163.com and I searched Brassroots District in the search bar and nothing comes up for
Oh,
me.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know why that would be, because this is your page right
Me.
here. This is, I'm assuming this
Oh,
is
so
you.
you're on an app or something like that. I see.
Yes,
Yeah, that looks just like me.
there you go. That's you.
Yeah. So wait, let me see, because I'm sure people are going to be asking and trying to do this in real time. So what am I doing wrong here? Is this the correct website? I'm screen sharing right now, if you can see that.
Yes, and oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay. So you need to go on the second tab there. You see, you're like, have you? Yeah,
This one.
yes, exactly.
Oh,
Oh,
and
no,
what is
it's,
this QR
if you
code
just
telling me?
click out of that, X out of that.
Okay.
That's
Still don't see anything.
that's strange because it is coming up on
So
the.
if we were to do it like Dua Lipa here, oh, so Dua Lipa doesn't come up either. I'm assuming she's got music here.
That's
So
strange. Yeah, it works for me on mine. Maybe we could.
So I don't feel that bad. I'm on Chrome. Yeah. So
if you just go back into the search bar there.
This one.
Yeah, and then you can click there, Dua Lipa, right? So if you click there and then go down. Oh, no, sorry. If you could click it back into the search bar, back at the top. Yeah.
Let me just turn this
and
thing
then
off here.
Yeah.
All right. Click down here.
And then you see her name there. So if you click there you go.
Ah, here it is. Okay. So you don't hit enter.
It's not coming up.
Well, it doesn't work for me.
Oh, okay. My end. All right.
Let me see if there's like so that shows up here. This is Andrew's band that I was talking about.
How about try searching Grassroots District together? Maybe there's a threshold.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's interesting. Trying to see some other artists. That's interesting how you can see it, but I can't see it. I guess it's because it's in the app versus the thing here. So for artists that want to break into China, maybe that they don't necessarily have a presence right now, or it's like Grassroots District that we got 3 comments or so or whatever, and we're like, well, let's see if we can bust this open a little bit more. What would you recommend would be the first steps, and how would an artist go about doing this?
So yeah, great question. I would say the biggest springboard to finding a fan base in China is through collaborations with local artists. That moves the needle more than anything else. So, and you might say, how do we do that when we don't know any? Like, let's imagine we know absolutely nothing about the market, and we've just gone on these platforms, and we've seen that there's a comment or two there, and you want to try and get a sense of like who is in my lane, who is in my genre in China, who I might be able to reach out to. So, and you can do that by searching around. Let's say first of all, you can search for other artists who are in your lane in the West and see who their fans are listening to. You can look into their comments, and this is a lot of manual work, but it can actually be really rewarding. It's to say, right, okay, my fans seem to also be fans of this Chinese artist because they're being mentioned in the comments, or they are, if I look up on Chinese social media, and that's another topic we can talk about actually, but like searching on platforms like Douyin, which is just DOUYIN.com, which is Chinese TikTok, or Weibo, which is
Oh no, I was just saying. Well, how would an artist that doesn't speak Chinese or have access to these apps because they're not in China go about searching for artists on the social?
In platforms? The same way as you could with the DSPs, you would just go on your browser, type in
the website
DOUYIN.com, or there's another, basically the Instagram of China, which is called Red in English, which that one you can actually download on the American App Store. So that's in Chinese, it's called, and this is a long list of letters, but you have to, you can find this. If you type out XIAOHONGSHU, Xiaohongshu, it's called, which means little red book in Chinese.
Okay.
If you go on that, which you can from the US or from anywhere outside of China, that's basically Instagram. So you can start looking around for see if anyone follows you, see if anyone's making any content about you, see if there's a fan account, for example. But then also look at, you could, let's say you make melodic hip hop. You could literally search in English or in Chinese if you want to try and translate it, melodic hip hop, and see what comes up. Or if you make EDM, you make dubstep, you're going to search dubstep and you're going to get a ton of results. and then you can look around and say, okay, like
on Douyin or on Red.
Yeah, on Red, on Douyin, on Weibo, which is weibo.com, which is the most similar to Twitter. Red these days, I would say, is probably the best shout. But you can look around on there and learn about what your lane is in China. And you can, through that, say, okay, which artists are popular here? And you can just straight up DM them and say, hey, do you know about me? You know, I would love to, I've been listening to your music. Often they will speak English, or you could, you know, also include a Google translated message in Chinese.
And how would you message them? You message them directly on Red. You can just DM somebody like you would on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
On Red, on Douyin, on Weibo, and even on the DSPs, if you see someone commenting, you can click through to that person's profile. Let's say they seem to be commenting on everything, like they're a super fan. You can even DM them directly through NetEase. And say like, oh, hey, like, I really appreciate that you're liking my music. Who should I do a collab with? In order to get your profile verified on NetEase and on QQ, that is kind of the trick, because that's actually quite a tough process. So you generally do need somebody who has like a company or like an agency who has a presence on the ground there to do that. But there's a lot that you can do there's a lot that you can learn just by using the platforms and kind of clicking around and searching for keywords.
Are there agencies out there that you would recommend that an artist or management could enlist, or how would somebody go about that, an indie artist that doesn't have a major label?
I would probably say that I wouldn't want to, you know, preference one over any of the others, but but if anyone wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, LinkedIn, I'm Alex Taggart. Instagram, I'm Beijing Junglist. So yeah, I'd be happy to kind of follow up with anybody.
Sweet. Well, Alex, thank you for breaking this all down for us today. And the China music market is like this extra kind of totally hidden, obscure beast that a lot of Western artists and managers have just not explored yet. And I think that it's obviously there's it's a massive market that people should start to take seriously if they haven't already. So right on. Well, thanks for all this. I have one final question that I ask everyone who comes on the show, and that is, what does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
I think it means having the freedom to choose the kind of life you want to live. You know, having, you know, the being able to, you know, deciding how you want to spend your time and being able to make a living doing that.
Awesome. Alex, thanks so much. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Today's episode was edited by Ari Davids with music by Grassroots District and produced by all the great people at Ari's Take.